Welcome to our 76th podcast. Today we'll be talking about signaling and what it means at work and how you can leverage it for positive results no matter where you are in the org chart. What's one thing you can do now to benefit yourself or your team through the mastery of signaling? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Welcome back, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Thanks for joining us on the 76th episode of our podcast. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, and I'm joined by my co-host, Cheryl Volpe. Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Great. Hi, Rich. Hi, everyone.
And Cheryl, we're going to talk about signaling, which you wrote a white paper that's available on our website. So are you ready to talk about some signals and how we can discuss that in the workplace?
Is that a signal?
For those of you who are just listening, the stark silence from Cheryl was a thumbs up.
2 thumbs up means I'm signaling a special agreement.
There you go. Right on. Awesome.
I'm ready.
You know, it's interesting that we were just watching New Girl. Are you familiar with that? With
No.
Zooey Deschanel. So
I love her.
But there was a part of one of the episodes where they're signaling she's with her best friend about or with emojis that don't make any sense to anybody but them.
Right.
You know, and there's a thing, right? Signals, they come in all different sorts of forms and but they have to mean something. And they do mean something. Like literally every one of them means something.
And sometimes you don't know what that meaning is and you interpret it your own way. And sometimes you don't know when you are emitting those signals.
Right.
The unintentional. So we'll get up to all of that.
Awesome. So one of the things that we have heard a lot of probably in the news, the vernacular, how everyday talk, is value signaling, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
The virtue signaling are these little hints.
Oh, virtue signaling, right?
Virtue signaling that we use to, they're humble brags in a way.
Sure.
I was going to point out that I'm wearing pearls because, I'm promoting this pearly executive status because pearls have this, you have to be very specific when you want to wear your pearls.
There you go. Right.
You don't have to say anything about it. It's just that I'm wearing pearls. I myself have also, one of the more common examples would be, I'm slammed. I'm so busy. I've got meetings all day long. And depending on the crowd you're in and the people you're talking to, this could be interpreted as my importance, my relevance.
Sure.
There are other ways that we do this that we are we think that we are being very subtle about it. But the truth is that most people around us, when we are doing these things, can see right through them. So there's a funny little game that we play with that virtue signaling, if you're aware.
Yeah. So it's like just basically the way we publicly communicate some certain value that we put on some, character trait or status or something like that, right? To basically gain social approval or establish some
Standard.
some status, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I am reminded just now of these jokes around different types of diets, for example. And
Mm.
I don't mean to offend anyone out there, but I'm going to tell this joke. How do you know when there's a vegan at the table?
Oh no.
Don't
How do you
worry.
know when there's a vegan at the table?
Don't worry. They will tell you.
There
And that's just
you
an
go.
example that's very prevalent right now is,
Yeah.
you know,
Sure. Sure. Right. So in the workplace, right, we've got quite a bit of this type of signaling happening because there's our want to be socially accepted. There's also a bit of competition that happens in the workplace, right? So, um, certain like the employers need to suggest that the company is successful and has authority and are competent, right? And a candidate also needs to demonstrate that we want to be here and we have this amount of, focus and resilience and all those things that the company is looking for, right?
absolutely. And if you are not, in fact, working at a company, but let's say you're interviewing and
Hmm.
there is this opportunity to speak to the employer may only know about you so much as what is in your resume or on your LinkedIn. And that kind of signaling is a type of signaling. It's formal signaling.
Hmm.
And there's some virtue signaling in there also. A degree, an advanced degree, for example, signals resilience, hard work, cost, investment.
Sure.
And without knowing anything about you, that employer has to interpret those signals until they have a chance to meet you. And there's a gap of knowledge before those conversations or those in person meetings happen. And even once they begin, there's still gaps in knowledge. There's an
Hmm.
asymmetry of knowledge, and
Sure.
signaling and interpretation of those signals bridges that gap.
Is it fair to say I've had several psychologists that I've talked to before who have said it's a very trite saying, right? That perception is reality.
Mm.
But does that play into this concept of signaling? Like, is it that perception that
It's a great question.
is
It's a great question because I may be projecting a certain perception, but you may be seeing right through it.
sure,
So there is this masking part of that, uh, that idea. Now, if I am outright lying about my background or credentials, and there's no way for you to verify any of that, then yes, your perception of that reality will be what you think is true. So
sure.
so what as our conversation goes further, we'll talk about transparency and how to what role transparency plays in this whole concept of signaling.
Now, you in our show notes here, you were talking about a theory of dramaturgy. Is it?
Oh, yes, yes. So in improv, there is this suspension of disbelief in that during improv, you are putting across a persona, a situation, you are
Right.
signaling an outcome.
Sure.
And that relates to theater. And that is absolutely how signaling can be translated in the workplace. The drama, the acting, the theater aspect of signaling. So yeah, it has roots in dramaturgy.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, really, the self that we like it or not, the self we bring to the either the sales table or that we bring to the interview stage, right? Whatever part of that where we're trying to either sell ourselves or sell a product or negotiate or convince somebody of something. There's this. this different self that sometimes comes out, right? Because we need to demonstrate some level of either competence or value, that we're going to bring to the person that we're trying to convince to do business with us.
Right. Right. And that's a skill set that can be developed.
Yeah,
Right. And
for sure.
it takes practice and mirroring and awareness.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, let's do this. We're about at a time where we should take a break. And when we come back, let's let's talk about how emotional intelligence plays into all of this. So EI, we've brought this up several times in other episodes. Um, but how does that come through in how we signal things at work? Fair enough.
Speaking of awareness. Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Great.
We'll be right back.
Meet Hermie the HR Hermit Crab. Laugh, learn, and lead better with Hermie. Hermie is here to tackle workplace madness with heart and humor from Harmonious Workplaces. He's perfect for HR pros, leaders, and change makers. Hermie teaches workplace lessons through cartoons and is great for team discussions and workshops. Get your copy on Amazon now. www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com. Again, that's hermiehrhermitcrab.com.
And we're back. So, Cheryl, we've been talking about signaling in this episode, and coming back from the break, we teed this up as talking about emotional intelligence. And you said, this is about being aware, which is really cool because this ties into our conversation with Dr. Jana Van Thiel, who was one of our professors and a guest on our show recently.
And
Right.
she has a great podcast going on right now called Quest to the Core.
Quest to the Core. So
Yeah.
go find that on all the streaming channels. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the episode that we talked about, or we had her on as a guest, there was this element of awareness, right? Especially self-awareness. But they talk a lot about that too. But in the white paper that you wrote, you were talking about impression management and emotional intelligence here, right? In the context of how we signal at work.
Right. And this impression management goes hand in hand with the EQ, obviously, in that when you are aware of the signals that you are putting forward, either formally or informally, you are aware to the point where you can control what you are putting out to get the desired outcome or the desired influence or the desired impression that you are intending to leave in the room. And without that knowledge of tone of voice, posturing, gesturing, you can in fact
Dress, like you said, with
Yeah.
your pearls, right? I mean,
Absolutely. There
just to
are
make
certain
that.
cultural standards within at least our culture here that certain attributes are expected of men and women in business.
Yeah.
For an attire. Although we have seen as time goes by that becomes more and more creative, right? There's not this, women are not wearing pantyhose to the office in the summer, right?
That's right.
That
Yes.
I cut the tail end of, unfortunately.
We don't have people drawing a line on the back of their legs to
Yes.
represent that they might have had nylons.
Yes. There
Yeah.
is a constant evolution of these types of standards and values.
Yeah.
But getting back to the point of being aware of what you are signaling, either through your dress, your posture, your tone.
Mhm.
If you are unaware, you could be projecting information that is the antithesis of what you are in fact intending to achieve or influence. So that's
Yeah.
why it's
And those
important.
and those people that tend to have a higher. So there's different types of intelligence, right? But emotional intelligence is this awareness and perception, the awareness of one's own emotions, but also to some extent the perceptions of how others are, right? In the form of empathy, right?
Absolutely.
Is that fair? Yeah. Um, so I love that you outlined, those formal and informal signals that can happen here, because there are certain, like within a culture, right? There are certain rituals, certain standard behaviors that are artifacts of the values of the culture, right? And those may be the more formal things, right? This is how we do certain things at certain times and under certain circumstances. Um, and being cognizant of how we feel and how others feel during some of those, because sometimes people you may perceive that some people are just going through the motions or don't find value in some of these types of, situations, right?
Right.
Some of these rituals. It's important to be able to pick that up, particularly from a management perspective. But then there's also these informal signals, like, the communication styles, work habits, nonverbal, even verbal, jargon and stuff like that, right? That we use to interact with other people socially.
Right. Right. It's talking the talk, walking the walk. If you are a manager that says you have an open door policy and yet your door is never open, no one ever gets admitted, and you cannot interrupt them in any case.
Right, right.
It's
And in this case, does that beget this trust and this level of, camaraderie and cohesiveness within the organization if what you say is contrary to what you do? Yeah,
right. Exactly. And if
yeah,
as a leader, I can say this is our mission. These are our vision and values. And yet I do not promote them in my gestures, my behavior, my tone, my availability, then that uh, dissonance will create disengagement,
right.
and it breaks down trust and morale
Yeah,
and psychological safety for that matter. That all,
yeah.
that all done.
Well, and we've talked a lot about different types of leaders, but one of the things that I recall in several episodes, is that you were bringing up transformational leadership. And one of the elements of transformational leadership is, um, the walking the walk and talking the talk and being consistent with those values, right?
Right, right. And you don't want your the impression of others of you to be that you're a hypocrite. You don't want your reputation. And that's another element we haven't touched on yet, but reputation is a form of signaling that can go before you into a room.
Sure.
If you have a solid reputation, obviously what you emit in person in that room with others will have that going for it before you even arrive.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And that reputation, um, is something that I think we have a lot of leaders that actually invest in reputation management, in their careers, right? They actually put money towards, how do I look online to the outside world, right? How do I look inside of my office and inside of my, workplace, and, um, I, and then there's, how do I look to, even outside of work, right? I've seen quite a few, um, and I've actually engaged in some consultants who have, helped me to understand, how should I better express myself to update things like my LinkedIn profile and all that, and what am I signaling and conveying out into the world, right? So,
Right.
um, yeah, getting some outside help can sometimes help with that.
It can. However, I have seen that for every person you ask about how those things should be tailored, you will get a different answer.
That's true.
How long should your resume be? Well, if you've got 30 years of experience, maybe you should hide that, or you should have 4 pages, right? Let it show.
Right.
So
Right.
there's that. And then it's also the reason that referrals and networking have so much emphasis in our work culture right now, right? Because I can form an impression of you instantly just by looking at your LinkedIn. And if there's anything on there, informally, subconsciously even, that strikes a potential employer as not their ideal, you don't have a chance to speak for yourself in that case.
Sure.
It used to be just, here's my resume when you send it, or even when you get there, you have that chance of that in-person impression.
Yes.
For better or for worse, right?
Right.
But
Right.
now that layer of reference between employers and their network, if they're even looking outside the company to fill open, a lot of companies will have those internal people identified already.
Oh yeah. Yeah. For sure.
That's a whole
And
nother episode.
that it really is, because there's on the whole selection process and all that, like how people are signaling, again, those kind of either intentionally or unintentionally, how are they signaling their potential candidacy? That begets a whole separate episode that we may want to do at some point.
I just saw a post from someone who talks about job seeking as an expert, and the headline on their post recently was, what's the one thing not to do in Rich Crew's voice? What's the one thing not to do when you get to an interview? And it seemed so obvious to me that this had to be his topic for the day, but it was, don't ask about the comp in the first 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
sure.
And I thought, well, that's most certainly a signaling that will lose you that job. But
That's true.
maybe
Yes.
that's not obvious to a lot of people.
And to some people, just, for some people, that might actually be the thing that puts them either saves them from going down a path that they don't want to go down, or can position them to get the role that they're looking for. And it depends on the audience.
I'm
I think,
so glad
right?
you said that, Rich, because as you were speaking, it occurred to me, of course, that's a form of transparency that can be valued in the right.
Sure.
Like you just said, it depends on the audience. It depends on the situation, right? That kind of
Right.
boldness, that kind of, no BS about it. I need to make some money. What are you
Right.
offering, right? And
Yeah.
again, if the person who's asking that question has a reputation that makes them worth it, yeah.
Well, I'll say, like, one of our other former guests, Elizabeth Constantine, right, helps executives to position themselves for the next stage of their life when they are in a transition, right? When they have to leave an organization, move into another one.
Abreu.
So this is
Abreu, yeah.
Abreu, yeah. And this is all about developing your signals intentionally. This is very, that's very intentional, right?
Like a boss, which is the title of her book.
Yeah.
It's developing your signaling like a boss.
That's right. That's right. Like a Boss. Go check it out on Amazon. It's a good book. Good read.
This is not a paid solicitation.
That's right.
Continue.
Well, let's do this, Cheryl, because I think we're at a time where we're going to take our second break here. But when we come back, let's talk about some of those. How can we really apply this to something that's actionable, in the workplace, if that makes sense.
Sounds great. Makes sense.
All right. We'll be right back.
Dysfunctional organizational cultures and poorly managed transformations can devastate employee morale and motivation, leading to disengaged employees, poor work quality, and the loss of your best people. The impacts to your organization include high costs, low productivity, and wasted resources. At Harmonious Workplaces, our purpose is to help you build the best workplace possible. We are advisors applying proven organizational development and industrial organizational psychology methodologies to help you become your best organization. We are doers, using time-tested principles to help you execute organizational change initiatives smoothly and successfully. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com.
And we're back. So Cheryl, signaling. We've been talking about signaling. We've talked about what it is, how it's done, how it's used, intentional and unintentional. What can we take from this besides going to the website and actually downloading the white paper? What can we take from this episode that we can share with our audience as we wrap up today's episode?
Great. Thank you. Yes, download the white paper.
Yes.
You'll see we used some of it, but not all of it. I think that the biggest takeaway here is, number one, be aware of what you are bringing into a room, any room, whether it's socially, with your family, with your loved ones, at work. Just be aware of what you are bringing into that room, how you are changing the dynamic in that room. And with specific relation to work, make sure that you are aware of the impression that you might be making on others with your gestures and your behavior. And it doesn't require this level of awareness every minute. And it doesn't require this level of awareness only if you're a manager, only if you're a leader. This goes to, again, like we said, no matter where you are on the org chart.
On the org chart, yeah.
The understanding that you can be harming your reputation at work by being unaware of the signals that you're putting out. And you could be benefiting yourself to harness what that signaling can be. And as an organization, in the culture of an organization, to put an emphasis on this idea of transparency and not being able to walk the walk after talking the talk. And where I mean transparency in that case as a leader is, again, if these are our vision and values for the direction of this company, on one hand, a leader could say, look, we all know the real mission here is to make money, right? That would be a level of transparency that nobody would argue with.
Sure.
But it's more nuanced than that, right? There has to be a concerted effort of strategy, effort to get to that kind of mission. And that's where values come in. And you don't have to be a hypocrite to talk about the vision and values that offer a cohesive vision for an organization. You can talk about them, uphold them, and still be profitable.
Yeah. And that aligns very much with various types of research. We've talked about John Cotter's 8-step model of change, but the 5 practices of exemplary leadership from the Leadership Challenge. This inspire a shared vision, right? That aligns very well with that, right? And so that's this goes with that. You're talking about awareness, like self-awareness, and how we are, but being aware of how we interact within the culture of the organization. So having that culture awareness of what are the expected norms, outward signs, behaviors, signals that reflect the espoused values of the company, that stems from, Edgar Schein's, we've talked about that before, the basic underlying assumptions as to why we're here, right?
Yes.
Why does this organization exist? What are we here to do?
You have reminded me of another element to this that we haven't talked about yet, and it is this the concept of burnout, right? So
Mm,
just touching briefly on the idea of norms, right?
hmm
There can be an unspoken norm in a workplace culture that you will work around the clock. You'll be available on weekends.
hmm
You won't take sick days, right? This is
Right.
something we've heard before, in that the vision and values are well-being and health and meditation at your desk and take a breath. Or that can be contrasted with the informal, quiet signaling that if you take advantage of any of those, you will appear to be less committed than someone that you might be competing with.
No, yeah, sure.
So that is the job of a manager or a leader, to be aware of burnout on that level. And is the signaling overwhelming to the point where it's affecting the well-being of others
Oh, right.
on the
Yeah.
goal to making that profit?
Yeah. So we need to be able to also, pick up the signals that are given to us from our, again, unintentional, weak or strong, whatever, but those signals that come from the workforce that says, um, I'm burned out, I'm stressed out, I'm not going to be able to perform. Excuse me, I'm not going to be able to perform. Um,
At the level,
because at the level you're expecting, because I'm at my threshold, you know.
right? And then that's about boundaries. And that is
Mhm.
also another element of signal, right?
Sure,
I
sure.
have a boundary. I will not be exposed to the point of burnout, whether or not you are aware of it as my manager.
Mhm, mhm.
And depending on the culture, again, that's what comes back. That's why we're talking about transparency, substance over style. This idea that I will not be afraid to take a sick day because there is an understanding that well-being is an actual value, and my leaders signal that in an authentic way.
Sure, sure. And how do I put this? When we're consistent um with the values, the culture of the organization, and what people have, the expectations and perceptions that people have of us, particularly as managers and leaders, right? Then that begets that trust that we've talked about so much in other episodes. Our guests, if anything, that is a very strong common tie that our guests have had, is to talk about establishing trust between the members of the workforce, on all levels of the hierarchy, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense to me.
So we have to be just kind of putting a nice bow on this, right? So no matter what level you're at, from back office to the front line, right? Um, and on any rung there, right? Uh, Signaling is going to come into play, intentionally, not intentionally. But if you are aware and actually have that level of awareness, um, you're going to be able to what?
Appreciate the theater that
That's right.
involved with going into a workplace culture, There is
Sure.
theater there.
There is.
Being
Yeah.
aware of what you're adding to that theater, not to be confused with drama,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Right.
And just striving, again, no matter where you are in the org chart, to be true to your own values, stay as engaged as you can, be true to your own purpose within that environment,
Mhm.
ask questions, be curious, escalate when you feel as though your own vision and values are being strained because of signaling around you, whether it's informal or formal, conscious or unconscious. Sometimes you might have to point it out when you suspect it's unconscious from a
Sure.
colleague, right? And
Yep.
this can give rise to conflict and conflict mastery and uncomfortable conversations to take signaling head on when it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
As
And
well. Yeah.
yeah, right. I mean, and then understanding all of that is going to lead to better relationships, whether there's conflict or not, your ability to resolve that conflict, should lead to better relationships. And then, that should beget, better decision making and, uh, not, not just, not just retention of people, because there's more organizational commitment, but also better performance because you have this level of trust that it will be built among the rest of the
Yep.
workforce.
Yep. And track and measure that performance. That's the substance over style, right?
That's awesome.
Ground the value system within the work culture on measurable achievements so that
Right.
things don't degrade into hearsay, gossip, favoritism, these kinds of,
Hmm. Hmm.
have the benchmarks upon which people are uh, recognized be things that can be measured, grounding the system of signaling in formal, obvious,
So
and
from a
achievable.
form, yeah, yeah. So from a
Smart.
formal perspective, does that stem from like one's own goals and objectives? Is that where that stems from?
Can you rephrase your question?
Yeah, I'm saying to to be able to to be able to measure the effectiveness of our signaling, right? Does that stem from, when we think of measure, we have to, because I think that's an important aspect of this. This can be measured, right? Where does that measurement take place? I think in my mind, it comes from a form of signaling to some extent, which is setting goals, right? Actually setting organizational goals and then individual goals, work group goals, those types of things. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think what you are also leading into are norms. What is the system of norms within that culture? And how do the signaling that is appropriate or signaling that is positive play into those norms?
Oh yeah,
And how do norms and signaling work together to emphasize performance and achievement and goal setting and
that's great.
and the bottom line, right? So it's all very much connected. And in specific answer to your question, I would say that signaling itself can't be measured, but the
Hmm.
results
The results.
of it
Yeah,
manifest in measurable quantities.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So figure out how you can, what elements of your outcomes, that you can measure, and correlate that to your intention, the intentionality of your signals. Does that make am I
Right,
getting that?
right. For example, a norm would be, admit when you're wrong. If you made a mistake, that's a norm in the culture where you work. Whereas if a system of signaling is coming from a particular person who always blames somebody else or never takes the blame or never admits fault, then
Mhm.
that would be a form of um, impact that's coming out of that person who never admits to being wrong.
Sure.
But it can't be measured as an action, but
Right.
it can be measured when productivity in their department drops because there's this
Sure.
system of blaming going on.
Right. Right. So basically, when this blame has happened, does that correlate to or and potentially cause, right, some drop in
Engagement.
engagement, productivity, whatever those KPIs are going to be, key performance indicators. I think that's our first acronym for the day. That took a long time. Uh, all right,
Oh,
Cheryl. Well, are we
we just wrap it up before we
just
get any more
wrap it up
creative.
before? Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, with that, you want to take us out today?
I think you should take us.
Oh, I should
I'm
take us
signaling
out.
to you that it should be you.
Right on. All right. Well, um, folks, go to harmoniousworkplaces.com. Find the signaling white paper. I believe if you go to harmoniousworkplaces.com/signaling, you'll be able to access that. Download the white paper. It's free. It's just chock full of great information. We'd love to hear your comments and feedback on that. So drop us a line. And until we meet, continue to make change your friend. Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode.